In today's video, I'm going to show you how to turn pretty much any 3D printing file into a pot for your pot plants. Let's get started. How's it going, guys? Welcome back to Makers Muse. So, as some of you may know, I like to create 3D printing pots. I've done them quite a few times in the past, and often I'll give them to my mum, who likes to put stuff in them, and then she gives them back to me. It's gorgeous. But the idea came across to me that a lot of files online actually could be adapted into pots for pot plants quite easily using Meshmixer. I've been using Meshmixer for years now, and it's got some really sophisticated mesh editing tools that you can use to create these pots. But there's a few different methods you can apply, so I decided to make a video showing 3 different techniques that I use in Meshmixer to convert pretty much any 3D printable STL file out there into a pot you can use for your pot plants, or also for any sort of container you might like to put anything you like in, like candy or stocking stuffers, whatever. Let's get into the video. Alright guys, so let's jump right into it. So what I've got here is Meshmixer fired up with the Stanford Bunny. This file has been around forever, absolutely ever, and we're going to be using this to create our first pot. So, before we do anything to the file, you need to ask yourself these questions. What are you looking to put into your pot? How large do you want your pot? How thick do you want the walls to be? And probably want to note how big your printer is to actually justify how large you can print. Some people have little printers, can't print very large. Some people have massive machines like the CR10, and you can print pretty big. First, we need to define our scale. So let's go to analysis and units and dimensions. So this bunny is 50 millimeters high. That's a little bit too small. I've got a pair of calipers here just to help me judge distances. You could use a ruler as well. That's probably more logical. I'm thinking 120 millimeters high for my bunny. So I'm going to change the 50 to 120. And it updates. Nothing really changes because we're just changing the units of the file. It's not going to suddenly look bigger, but it is bigger, 120 millimeters there. And done. And also something to note with this version in Meshmixer is it's a non-manifold mesh. There's a big hole in its butt. So let's fix that as well. Let's go to Inspector, and Inspector will show any errors in the mesh and auto repair, and it just caps it off. Okay, so we've got our bunny, and it's the right size, but if you printed this, as you guys probably know, it's going to print solid. So how do you make it like this? Well, the first version is to use the hollowing command. So hollowing is what you do for resin 3D printing. You hollow out the print, so the resin you save resin. You don't want to print solid with like a SLA or DLP, like the Wanhao Duplicator 7. So to do that, I've actually got a whole video on doing it for resin printers, by the way, there. But to do that in Meshmixer, you go to Edit and Hollow. And this is where we're going to define our wall thickness, how thick you want the wall of your pot to be. So by default, it's at 2, and to be completely honest, that's probably fine for me. Because you're filling this with soil, it puts static pressure against the walls of the file, and you can actually print in Vase mode as well, which is another method I'll show later in this video. But for this, 2 is totally fine. Actually, you can probably even go to 1.5, to be completely honest. 1.5, update. And the really cool thing about using the hollow function in Meshmixer is you can add in drain holes. So we can generate some holes, and we can put a hole there, and a hole there, and we can enter a large size, so let's go with 10. They're probably a bit big. Let's go with 6. Alright, got 2 drain holes there. And we can also change, if you're finding you've got a really complicated STL file, you might want to change your solid accuracy or mesh density, but for this it's totally fine. The higher mesh density and higher accuracy, obviously the more polygons and the more computational power it takes to resolve. But we go to this and accept. Sweet. Okay, so I've got our bunny, and it's actually hollow. If I went to do a plain cut, you can see here, it's hollow. But how do we get this sort of shape? So as you can see with plain cut, that's how most people normally do it. You can plain cut and leave a void, and then that's where you could put stuff in. But I want to put stuff here in its back. I don't want to, plain cut it kind of like that. It might work for some models where you just want to cut the top off, but for this, no, let's not do that. So what I'm going to do is called a Boolean difference. So a Boolean difference takes a different model, a different mesh, and subtracts it away from another mesh. So we're going to go to Meshmix, and let's grab a... It really doesn't matter what for your model. It doesn't really matter. Just choose one that the shape makes sense for what you're doing. For me, I kind of want a cylinder like this, and I'll just stretch it and adapt it to make sense. That sentence made no sense. What I'm saying is you can grab any shape you want to do a Boolean difference. There we go. Okay, so we've got our cylinder. I'm going to rotate it around 90 degrees. Move it up, move it across, and then scaling's completely wrong, so let's change the scaling. I'm going to do it non-uniformly, so I'm going to just drag it from these points. This is going to start squishing it, which is fine. I don't really care about it being uniform. That's uniform, by the way, from the center. Move it up and across. And as you can see, this is pretty tedious. This is the most tedious aspect of the modeling of this technique anyway. But that looks pretty good. It's kind of intersecting its back there. It's got a little shape there. It's not touching the ears. I'm okay with that. Accept. Alright. I'm just going to change the colors just quickly under shaders. I'm just going to drop in different shaders. For some reason, those colors don't show the selections very well. The purple. I like the purple, but it doesn't show selection very well. So if you want to change the color of your mesh in Meshmixer, you can do it through the shaders here. But now going back to the standard gray. So to do a Boolean difference, you select your master, and then you select the tool, the one that will cut away, and then you do a Boolean difference. And there we go. So what that's done is it's cut away our cylinder from the original bunny mesh, and because we did hollow it out, it's got a nice hollow there. Some of you might also notice that when you tick the auto reduce result, sometimes things break. So I'm going to just try it with it ticked. If it does break in your model, that looks fine. W for wireframe. If it does break in your model, untick that. Just means there's more triangles. It's not a bad thing. It might make it resolve in your case. But that actually looks really clean. That actually looks really good. But if you do notice any stray fraggy edges, or you want to make it a bit smoother, we can actually use the sculpt tool to start tidying it up a bit. So you can go and just go to sculpt, and we'll turn the strength and size down like that. And then for brushes, I'm going to select shrink smooth. So you can use different types of smoothing, bubble, shrink, robust. To be honest, in this circumstance, you're not going to see much difference. Shrink is probably what I want. Just sort of pulls it down to a more smoother result, like that. And look, for this shape, it's probably doing more harm than good. But if yours has really sharp, craggy edges, you can use it to kind of remove those like that. Just don't go too thin, because remember, it's quite thin already. And that's going to do it for the first method of creating a pot out of the Stanford Bunny. Okay, so let's fire up my mini factory, which is a really good repository for STL files. And let's say I want to make something that's based off some old 3D scanned objects, something in their Scan the World initiative. Let's find that. So these are the files that are in the My Mini Factory Scan the World category. I love the cat. I just don't know how you'd make a pot out of the Geyer Anderson cat. But one of the models I did find that looked really tempting was this, a wellhead. So I don't know too much about the history of what wellheads were or are. I'm not a historian in the slightest, but it did look like a pretty neat pot. And this particular one has a little bit of a story behind it. And it says, wellheads not only protected the mouth of the well, but also provided an opportunity to make public statements of allegiance, which is pretty neat. So you've got all these different markings on it to obviously state their allegiance. And this is a 3D scan of a real wellhead. So we've got Meshmixer fired up again, and this is our wellhead. And yeah, it's definitely a 3D scan. It's really rough, but actually they've done a great job at stitching it together. You know, got all these different textures and things, and you can see it's got this divot inside. But for our pot, if we were going to turn this into a pot, say in that orientation, if this was the side, we want it to be a bit deeper. So I'll show you how I did this. It's a different approach to doing the hollowing tool, which you probably could still do in this. But in this case, I actually gave it a cylindrical hollow, which is just below the lip here. So it still goes in a bit. I wasted a lot of filament in this though. This is like 1 kilo of material. So this method uses a lot more filament than doing the hollowing or vase mode method. But anyway, that's cool. So first things first, this 3D scan's on its side. So I'm going to go to Edit and Transform and flip it around to 90 degrees. Now that's better. Accept, and we need a flat base to print it. Otherwise it's not going to print properly, so I'm also going to do plain cut. and cut down here just enough to start. That'll do. So I have a nice flat surface to start the print on, otherwise it's not going to be very stable with various tiny supports and things. That's not what we want. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a face transform. We're going to select various faces on this inside area and transform them down. So we're going to just pull them down into the shape, and that's what's going to create our pot. So to select the faces we want, we're going to go to select, and I'm at the top down view, and you just want to select around all the faces, not selecting the top surface, we don't want that. Just select around all of those. And the middle ones as well. And then you can extend it as much as you like. Just keeping in mind, we're not going to select those top ones. Okay, so I've selected our triangles, as you can see here. I'll just hit W. It is a mesh file, so lots of triangles. And I'm going to do a modify and optimize boundary. So that's given us a nicer boundary there, and then we can also smooth it as well. So optimize and smooth boundary. There we go. So that's given us a nice circle there to create our boundary, accept, and yeah, that looks quite good. Okay, so just for future reference, you can also create a face group from this. So modify, create face group. So now if I want to go back to that, I can just double click it and it will select all those triangles. So I'm just going to double click them again, selects that whole face group, and we're going to deform them. So let's do a transform. Transform, and then transform down, 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 like that. So what it's done is it's taken those faces and just pulled them down in space and added these new kind of janky looking joining faces. But that's okay, it's still a legit mesh. You can pull it down as much as you want, but you can't go through the base, obviously. So I'm going to pull it down to that much. It is very difficult to tell how far you've gone, so just keep that in mind. I can see here what the grid at that location there, and I can see I've got the grid there, so it's very close to the bottom but not intersecting, which is what we want. And accept. Let Meshmixer do its magic. Escape to clear selection, and there we go. So what we've done is we've taken this shape and pulled that surface down. So it still kind of looks like the original, but it's got this sort of joining face pulling it down. So let's do a plane cut to see what it looks like. Plane cut through. I'll just accept just temporarily. So here we've got the plane cut. Also, you can see some nasty mesh inaccuracies. That generally happens with scans, but that's okay. You can see what we care about is the base of our model is not too close. It goes down and it doesn't intersect anywhere on the sides. Good. Okay, undo that plane cut. Cancel that. Okay, so we've got our pot, and as you would know if you've owned any pot plants, you need drainage holes, otherwise the plants will start rotting when it rains. So we're going to grab a cylinder, drop that in, change its size to maybe 6 again, 6, accept, create new object, and we need to transform that so it's taller. So grab this to pull it up, so we're just stretching it basically. You see it's now going through the base and the top, and accept. I'm going to turn on the navigation menu for the objects browser. So here we go. That's under view object browser. So now we can see we've got our dropped part, our cylinder, and we can make copies of that. So I'm just going to hit duplicate here, duplicate, and I'll just transform these. That one can be there, that's fine. This one can be kind of here. That's fine. And this one can be over here. You could be more precise with this, by all means, but I'm not being precise, but that's fine. Okay, and as with before, we can do a Boolean difference. So I'm going to select the master and the tool, Boolean difference, accept, And you will have to do these one by one. So, master, tool, Boolean difference. And again, master, after accepting. And again, master, tool, Boolean difference. Accept. Cool. And that's our wellhead modified for 3D printing as a pot. And the end result looks like this. Alrighty then. So this is going to be the last way that I use to make pot plants or containers of various kinds. This is the Nuka-Cola design from Mischief Company on My Mini Factory. It's pretty darn cool. And I'm going to horribly bastardize it by turning it also into a very small pot by cutting the top off, and we're going to design it. We're going to make it designable for 3D printing with Vase mode. So at the moment, you can see he's designed these fins in at the stuff at the bottom. It looks really cool, but that means it's got these hollow details. It's not going to be printable in Vase mode, which is single perimeter, as it slowly goes up and up in the Z-axis. All right, so let's start cutting up this file. So let's do plain cut. Flip the direction and choose where you want the height of the pot to be. I don't really care. Let's go with that. And let's go with no fill. It's going to be a very small... Yeah, let's go up there. It's going to be a very small plant. There we go. Also, I'm not doing any scaling yet. You don't need to do scaling in this method, because Vase mode doesn't really care. We can do scaling later on. That's fine. So we've got this cut here, no fill, and got some crazy geometry stuff going on there. All right, and we're going to do another cut. So plain cut, and the bottom. We need the bottom to be flat, otherwise we can't print it. So let's move it up to there. Yep, that'll be fine. And again, no fill, cut. All right, so what we've got is this crazy nastiness at the bottom and this crazy nastiness at the top. But if we go to separate shells, we've now got multiple shells. We've got the outside, the inside, and some other random stuff. So I'm just going to delete the inside. Delete. Oh, that's the other one. And this little random bit here. Delete. Okay. So that's gone now. So what we've got is just the outside shell of this part. Now, sometimes it's more difficult to do that, but in this case, the thin wall was easy to remove by just doing 2 plain cuts and turning remeshed fill off. So we've got our shape here, and really all we need to do now is go to Analysis and Inspector and Automatic Flat Fill, Auto Repair All. And what this is going to do is take those outside boundaries and patch them up, just like that. There you go. And finally, you could do this in your slicing software, but I'm just going to go to Units Inspector, and for the height, I'm just going to make it 150. Done. All right. And the final step, we'll need to jump into our software. So I'm going to jump into Idea Maker for this. So I'm just going to save it as an STL file, export. Let this poor thing chug and chug and chug. I do need a new computer. Here we go. So here's our Nuka-Cola pot. Yeah, it doesn't really look like a Nuka-Cola bottle anymore, but it does look Fallout-ish still. Really neat. And basically, to print this in Vase mode, you go to Start, and let's just choose any random one. I do have a Vase mode setting automatically, but I'll just show you how I did it. So Advanced. And you basically need to go to the Other tab and Spiral Vase mode, make sure that's checked. And then, yeah, your layer height, whatever, change that to your preferences. I don't want anything, no brim. Oh, I have a brim, that's fine. And yeah, save, whatever. And then slice. And it actually says, you have Vase mode on, do you want to still slice? Yes, I do. And let's give us a preview. So this is the model sliced in Vase mode. So yeah, I can already see a few issues. To be honest, I should have seen that before. That flat spot there doesn't like being in Vase mode. So it's going up nicely here. Make it full screen. And curving over. You do need subtle curves in Vase mode, that's the trick. So that bit isn't a subtle curve, and it comes up nicely. What I could do is actually go back into Meshmixer. So to fix that area that's a bit nasty here, I'm just generating a face group with the right angles. That will do. except, so I can just select those triangles, and I'm going to just do a smooth transform. Yeah, I gotta smooth it out. Smoothing does make it look pretty good. So you can kind of remove that detail a little bit. That'll probably work. That's alright, let's do that. Clear selection. Okay, so it doesn't look as good as before, but it's sort of smoothed out a bit. Any errors? Sometimes it introduces errors. No errors. Okay, and I'll export that out again. Sweet, well here's our changed edited model, and yeah, it's much better this time. So depending on your layer height, it may still look a bit iffy there, but that's far improved. I've got this crazy line here as well, means it's not completely flat anymore, but whatever, that's not a big deal. And that's how you can make a pot from pretty much any STL file using one of those 3 methods. And that's how it works, guys. So here's the bunny printed out in Polymax PLA, and I haven't put anything in this one yet, but it would fit a nice little small succulent of some kind, or maybe even an air plant. You could do a really small one with an air plant. They don't need any soil. You just kind of glue them in place. But I'm really happy with this one. So this is the wellhead with a zygo cactus. So these are sort of these cacti have really nice flowers. This one's a bit worse for wear because we haven't had any rain for ages, and I've been out of town, so I haven't watered it for a little bit. But he'll bounce back. They're pretty darn resilient. And it looks great. I mean, you've got the terracotta-like filament there with the gold as well. It actually ran out of filament, which is why I ended up doing that. There's a little bit of a split there with the PLA, but no big deal. That's going to do it, guys. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful. And as I said at the start of this video, you don't just have to use it for making pot plants. You could use it for all kinds of containers. And yeah, I hope it inspires you to start firing up Meshmixer and doing some mesh editing, because it's actually not too difficult once you learn the tools, and it's really, really powerful. If you enjoyed this video, guys, on Makers Muse, want to see future 3D printing tips, tricks, reviews, and projects like this, hit that subscribe button. Helps us out a huge amount. I look forward to seeing you again very shortly. Catch you later, guys. Bye.
Here's the latter half of the 20th century, and man has sent rockets into deep space. He has placed satellites into orbit.